Saturday. I can't tell you how much I hate that song. Let me turn it down. It is 85 degrees. Yeah, I think so. I think it is. Let me unplug my phone just in case. Just in case it doesn't record the beginning. How was everybody's Mother's Day? Mine was eventful and not exactly like in a good way. I was sick the entire time. Of course, Moon would be sick. You know what? I'm actually like considering and changing my name to Moon because I don't like my real name. You may call it a midnight crisis, right? Did I say midlife or midnight? I meant midlife crisis. And I don't know, like, I have so much to talk about. Let's start first with my midlife crisis. Okay, so it's not a midlife crisis. Here's what's going on. I have been dealing with a lot of childhood trauma. Yeah. And sometimes I can get through it, and there are days when it just sneaks up on me. And I'm sure a lot of you could relate to this when I'm saying that I'm constantly checking my wallet. It's like an OCD thing now. Where I don't know, where the atmosphere just shifts all of a sudden. You're by yourself, you're doing stuff, you're cleaning, you're putting clothes away, whatever, right? Or whatever it is that you're doing. And then suddenly there's a shift in the air, and it just like kidnaps you and takes you back to a certain moment in your life that you didn't want to remember anymore. And suddenly you're there, and all those feelings of resentment and anger come back. Yeah, that happened to me earlier today. And I'm not kidding you all, I was like bawling my eyes out. And suddenly ChatGPT has become my new counselor because, you know, I like the counselor that I'm going to, but I don't see any progress. I really don't. I think that I would need 2 hours of therapy in order to see some kind of progress. And I'm not getting that. It's only 1 hour, and it's a bunch of just chit chat. And the moment that it starts to get deep, time's up. See you next week. And that's not doing me any good. I think what really triggered me though was I was talking to my sister-in-law last night. She called me and she says, hey, you know, we're going to have a birthday party for one of the grandkids. You're welcome to come. It's going to be at noon. We're having burgers and hot dogs. And I'm like, ooh, that sounds good. I said, okay. And then I was telling her about how my husband's daughter and son, who is in town, he lives in San Antonio. He has 2 sons that live over there actually, and then he has a daughter that lives here. And one of them was coming down with his girlfriend. Supposedly they were going to go to some family party on her side tonight. And they got here yesterday. They were going to go to the island. I live near the island, South Padre Island, in case you haven't heard of it. And I'm about an hour away or so. Anyway, they were going there, and my husband's daughter, she had come over for a visit with us on Monday, this past Monday. And so when we told her about her brother coming down, we're like, okay, so why don't you come over? The husband's not in town anymore. He just left Thursday. He's a truck driver. I have to keep saying that. He's a truck driver. He just left Thursday, and I told her, okay, look, why don't you come over Saturday when your brother comes down, and that way he can meet his nephews, and you guys can see each other after so many years, because it's been years since they've seen each other. And, you know, we'll see where that goes, you know. And then she's like, yeah, that sounds like a plan. And then, here's the thing with me, though. I have good intentions in my heart, and I offer things like that, you know, like opening up my home or my friendship, whatever it may be. But when I feel like other people are taking advantage of that the wrong way, and or the husband starts pushing the idea, I hold back. I just pull away, and I change my mind. I'm like, forget it. I don't want to do this anymore. And of course, he gets upset with me and everything, and he doesn't seem to understand. Like, let me do the planning. Let me go with the flow. Like, get out of my ear. Stop telling me what to do. Stop telling me how to do it. Let me just let it happen naturally, because the more that I feel like he's pressuring me, the more I don't want to do it. And I've always been that kind of person, you know, except when it comes to jobs, of course. But when it comes to people, relationships, I'm like that. I just don't like being forced. And there's a story behind that force, okay? And I'm not going to talk about it, but whatever. And I hadn't heard anything all week from either one of them, you know. And his son was supposed to have called me or texted me yesterday, and he didn't. So I assumed, okay, well, maybe they changed their mind. I'm going to go to my sister-in-law's for the kid's birthday party. I'm going to enjoy myself, you know, and then just come home and relax the rest of the afternoon, because, well, I still had laundry to do and stuff, but I had already cleaned my apartment and stuff. And suddenly his daughter texts me this morning, and she's like, oh, you know, my brother just texted me. He should be in like around 3 o'clock in town. So is it all right if we go over at that time? And I was like, what? Like, wait a minute. He was supposed to have texted me. Like, he never did. Long story short, it was upsetting me that, you know, he of all people was supposed to have kept in touch with me and communicate with me, and he didn't. So I was like, well, I'm gonna go over here, and then I have to go do this and this and this, and I had a couple of things I needed to do out here, and then I said, then I'll be home. And she's like, okay, well, just let us know when you're there so we can go over. And I said, okay. And then I started telling the husband, I changed my mind about this. I don't want this anymore. It's not going the way I want it. I don't want this anymore. And of course he gets mad at me, and I'm like, fine, whatever, you know, like, I'll just do it, you know. And then while I'm at my sister-in-law, she texts me, and she tells me that one of the babies is sick. He's got that hand, feet, and mouth disease or whatever, that rash going on. I was like, what? Her toddler had this last year. Now the baby has it? The baby's not even a year old. I'm like, how do these kids keep getting this rash or disease, whatever it is? How do they keep getting it? Like, I don't get it. Where are they picking it up from? They're not going to daycare. They're not in school. Like, how are they getting this? It must be from her church, or they're picking it up from somewhere, from someone, you know? I don't understand. So I took that as a way out. And I was like, okay, so she can't come. He's contagious. I cannot be around anybody contagious. I have a very low sensitive immune system. And so then I told her brother, you know what, we're going to have to cancel, this and this and this happened. So I'm not going to lie, I was a little happy about it. Not that the child was sick, but I was happy that I didn't have to follow through this. Because on top of everything, I also have social anxiety. Of course I do, right? And I really do, though. And so I saw that as my way out, and the husband got upset with me, and I said, hey, it's not my fault. How am I supposed to control who gets sick and when and where and how, everything. Excuse me. So that didn't happen. But back to that conversation with my sister-in-law, she was talking about, my mother-in-law and father-in-law, and which are her parents and the husband's parents. And I was asking her, hey, so how's your mom doing with her health? Does she actually have dementia? Because this is something, did I say that right? Dementia, not dementia. That sounds like a name. Hi, my name is Dementia. How is she doing with that, right? And she's like, well, we think she has it. And when she said that, I kind of knew that she doesn't, okay? I felt like my father-in-law was trying to push this idea that my mother-in-law has dementia and she's on her first stages of Alzheimer's. And of course, the husband over here is all like, oh, my mom is sick, I can't believe it, and panicking and everything. And I'm like, no, I don't think that's what it is that she has. It's very doubtful to me that that's what she has. Well, you don't know, you're not a doctor. I said, yeah, but no, I don't think that's what she has. And why I always thought that is because she still has a very good memory. She's not forgetful, or she's not easily she's not triggered. I've never seen any episodes that show that she may have signs of dementia. Now, one of the sister-in-laws did say that they've seen her where she has a tantrum and stuff. But I said, are we sure that's not just her age? Because she is up in age. She's not a young pup anymore. She is very up there in age. And that kind of tends to happen with people, But anyhow, as we're talking, and I'm trying to cut through all the chase, I'm sorry. She says, and these were her exact words, she says, Mom is starting to take her attitude out on us, blaming us for the way my dad treats her. And she keeps bringing that up, that my dad treated her really bad throughout their entire marriage, and she is fed up with it, and she's not going to listen to anybody anymore. The moment she said that to me, I said, you know what? I didn't want to say anything. I was trying to find a way on how to say it. But yeah, I believe her. Because your brother has the same traits as your dad. And he tends to try to push my boundaries. Sometimes he does go over my boundaries in how he treats me. And I have to remind him about my boundaries. And it's quite exhausting. It really is. I keep seeing this light up. It's really exhausting to me, having to remind somebody over and over and over. What did I say about that? What did I say about don't bring this up? What did I say about this? And just, having these long, drawn-out discussions and arguments that are not necessary because we already covered this before. And I said, and no offense, but I knew your mom was fed up a long time ago. I could see it. I could see it in her. And I really never thought she had dementia or Alzheimer's. I think she's just, like she said, fed up. So that kind of triggered me, right? And by the way, my sister-in-law completely understood everything I was talking about. She knows her parents and her brother better than anybody. So she knew exactly what I was talking about. So then, I was talking to the husband about that. I went to the party and everything, and it was really nice and fun. Her grandson is 12 years old. I love that age. And I saw his mom, my mother-in-law. She was sitting in a chair, and the husband she offered her husband, my father-in-law, a slice of cake after we all sang happy birthday. And I don't know what he said to her. And then another, who was it? Oh yeah, it was my sister-in-law. Hello. My sister-in-law offered him a slice of cake, and he took it. And so, of course, my mother-in-law gets upset, and she says, oh, so you didn't want to take it from me. So that's what I get for offering you some cake. You're going to treat me bad here, too, because of that. And she sat there sulking. And my sister-in-law just looks at me, and she nods side to side like, oh, here we go again, I suddenly saw myself. And when I got home, like I said, I had a memory, and that piled on top of that, what I just witnessed, I called the husband, bawling my eyes out, and I said, look, I don't expect you to understand, but I can't, I need help. And he's like, why? What's going on? And I start telling him, like, I can't even tell you because you wouldn't understand. At first, I was talking about my past, my mom, my childhood. And you all, it is so hard to explain that to complete strangers or even somebody so close to you. Because not everybody understands. Not everybody knows when you say a certain word or when you talk about a certain feeling. They're not going to know. To them, it's like, huh? What do you mean? They can't relate at all. So it's so hard to get somebody it's so frustrating to talk about it with somebody that does not have a clue. They can't feel what you felt or what you've been feeling. And then all of a sudden I started telling them, like, I told them about the situation from the party, and I said, I knew your mom wasn't going sick or crazy. I said, she's fed up, and I can see that. I can see why. And I'm there too. Mine didn't take that long. And all he said was, okay, well, we'll work on it. We'll work on it. Those are words that I have heard before. And the working part, it's kind of like when they're working on the street somewhere, everybody witnesses that wherever you live. They're working on the road, and they say it's going to be closed for like only a month or two, And that month or two takes 6 months, sometimes a year, before they actually finish the freaking road and you can finally drive through there. You don't have to go all the way around. That's what his working on it sounds like, and that's what it's been like. Only it's well past a year and we're still working on that road. And it's also like, speaking of roads, because this is exactly what I was thinking about. I said, oh my God, like I am on the same road. There's only one road that I've ever been on. I've never come across a fork on this road that I've been on. And then I started comparing my life with I don't even have to reach that far, with my other family members that were given more opportunity, more encouragement, that were offered other paths. And they took it. And they're so good. Like, they're fine. They're so good doing in their lives, and I'm still in the same path as I was as a child. And so when I had that moment, that trigger moment earlier about my past, I was like, wow. I had to learn surviving skills back then. There was no life. I don't know who can relate with me out there, but I never had a life. Never. And I'm not joking. I lived growing up with a knife in my hand. When my dad passed away at 6 years old, it was survival mode. I knew where I stood with my mom. She knew what she wanted, and she had no time for me. I was neglected. I was lonely. I was left alone. I had to teach myself, and unfortunately, back then there was no internet, there was no TikTok. I couldn't look up surviving skills. I just did the best that I could. And the only way I felt safe was with a knife in my hand. And so when I call myself Moon, it's because I relate so much to the moon. I would sit outside on the front step and look up at the moon. And that was my escape from my life. That was the only way I knew how to escape my life. And I would dream of another life, of getting away from the one that I had. But I quickly realized that that wasn't going to happen. So I would go back inside. I would go hide in my bathroom with my knife. Till I got older. And as I got older, it didn't get any better with my mother or with life. And see, I was thinking about that. I was thinking about my neighbors. I was thinking about my cousins. They all had their fathers in their lives. that made sure they went down the right path. Now, it is not my father's fault that he wasn't in my life. He passed from a heart attack. In fact, he was my age when he passed. He had no control over that. But it was so hard growing up and seeing that family dynamic in them. And I was always the one outside looking in. And I'm still there, even now as an adult. See, my brothers and my sister, they all have my dad around growing up. He was there for them. They all turned out great. They all had great careers. They're retiring pretty soon. Well, one of them is like my eldest brother, the eldest of my brothers. He retired already. Then the middle one passed. The little one's still working. He'll be retiring soon though. And then of course my sister and her husband, the small business that they're running, they're going to be retiring. That's going to be passed on to my nephew. And then there's me, the baby, the youngest. Who doesn't have anything. And do you know that I haven't even had time to think for myself? It's always been somebody else needs something and I need to stop what I'm doing to help. Whether it was in a relationship, whether it was my children, another family member that was more important. But it was always something. And so I was thinking about that earlier and I was like, man, I wish I could just get away and finally think without having anybody in my head and finally decide what I need to do with my life for once. Not having somebody else tell me what to do. Oh my God, you all look. I haven't heard them in years. Since the 80s. Air Supply. I used to love listening to them. Anyhow. Yeah, I get distracted. Sorry. But it's always been like sacrifice after sacrifice with me, you know? And I don't think, and listen, I'm not blaming my children. I don't think they realized how much of a sacrifice I had to make for them. I had plans in my life, you know? I was going to get into the nursing program at my local college. I had already taken all the prerequisites. But because of my children and no support system from my family, I had no one to watch my children so that I can take the necessary classes that I needed. And then I wasn't financially stable either because I was working part-time at the dealership. I didn't have a partner, a husband, to help me out financially with the rest of the bills that I needed to pay for. I needed to work. There was no way around it. I couldn't stop working just to be in school. So I had to give up that dream. And then I thought, well, I'll become a medical assistant. I really want to be in the medical field. I'll be a medical assistant, right? Nope, same thing. My classes were offered at different times during the day, and there was work, and I couldn't miss it. So then I thought, phlebotomy, for God's sake, you know? So I took phlebotomy during the weekends. I finished that. That didn't work out. Finally said, okay, that's it. I give up. I just give up. And so here I am. And mind you all, I'm not telling you all this part of my story for sympathy. I just needed to get all this off my chest. Little by little, I want to start talking about that. And start releasing it all. And I want to hear from you all as well. We'll see where this goes. So no sympathy in the comments, please. I want encouragement. That's something I never got. All right? Love you all. Bye.